Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode, and we will discuss on a topics, some sort of philosophical discussion and questions. Our today's question is there absolute mortality? We have our world famous speaker, Professor Edward, Professor David Smith, and Mr. Adam. You know, World Talent Economy Forum, we are engaging with a real life student, lot of institution in South Asia. Already we are working with 22,000 institutions, schools, madrasa, international schools, university, college, millions of people we are engaging, and we start our summit with the local students. So from our speakers, those who want to join with us, you can share your logo. We can add in our banner and our branding and everything. Hopefully it will be one of the interesting and largest uh, uh, human progressive collaborations, because we are getting too much of support from a lot of organizations like government agencies, Central Bank of Bangladesh, and many corporations. And especially I want to give thanks the institution, those who support World Talent Economy Forum for the human progression. Professor Edward, is there absolute mortality, or what do you think?
Well, I will answer the question with an even more basic question. Why do we need morality? Why do we need a moral code to begin with? And I think if we answer that question, then we can answer the other questions. And I would say the first thing to know, the basis of morality is life. You can look at the world or the universe, as it were, in terms of there's matter and energy that is non-alive, and then there's matter that is alive. A rock can change its form, it can melt, it can be converted into energy, but it's still matter or energy. Life is different. Life is a self-sustaining process that reproduces itself, and once that process stops, then it becomes dead matter. Life is a fundamental. You can't talk about morality without life, but we have to take it a little bit further. Every living entity has a unique means of sustaining itself, of surviving. Sensation, for example, that's one of the attributes of life, is it is some way connected to the physical world, the energy world. And there's certain organisms that basically survive because it has a capacity of sensation. For example, certain small micro amoebas and so forth might move away from a heat source or move in a certain direction because they sense this is danger and it will not be good for their survival. Higher forms of life, of course, are more sophisticated. They have hardwired capacities, hardwired by evolution. They have perception. They can see stuff. For example, we talk about what is the unique form or capacities of survival of an eagle. Well, it has eyes that can see prey as it's flying way, way, way high, eyes that are much better than humans. It has wings, so it can fly. These are unique capacities of an eagle that allows it to survive. And you could go and look at other forms of animals and say, what are the capacities that allow it to survive and to continue to live? With human beings, our unique capacity that allows us to survive is the human mind. And what do we mean? What is unique about the human mind that separates us from other living entities? Well, I'm going to focus on four things. First of all, is our particular form of consciousness, our rational capacity. We can have knowledge of things that are abstract. If I say F equals ma, force equals mass times acceleration, well, those are abstract concepts. There's no actual entity that we call force. Force is an attribute of entities that we can talk about because we have a capacity to understand abstractions, to have abstract knowledge. That is unique with human beings, and apparently it's in some lower versions of that in certain animals, dolphins and the like. But that's something unique about us, is the ability to have abstract knowledge. So I can say E equals mc squared, energy equals mass times the speed of light squared, and we can understand it. have some idea about what it is. We're not nuclear physicists. Our capacities are, in a sense, outside of time. We can remember the past and we can imagine and anticipate the future. This is a unique aspect of our rational consciousness. The second aspect of our consciousness is self-consciousness. We can think about the fact that we're thinking. We can reflect upon the fact that we're reflecting. This incredible, weird, unique capacity of us makes us different from most lower animals. Aristotle in book 9, chapter 9 of the Ethics talks about thought thinking about itself. He says, not only do we see, but we can think about the fact that we're seeing. Not only can we walk, we can think about the fact that we're walking and reflect upon the fact that we're walking, and we can think about the fact that we're thinking. That's really a cool observation. That's part of this unique human capacity. Number 3 is we have some form of volition, free will, whatever you want to call it. That's unique. We can make choices. William James, the great psychologist, talked about the first act of will is to be able to focus. We've got all of this stuff kind of going through our consciousness. And James said the ability to hold something before your mind's eye, so to speak, is the sort of first act of will. Ayn Rand said it was to be able to focus on something. I consider that to be kind of a variation of what James said. Another philosopher, Irving Babbitt, at the beginning of the 20th century, is considered a new humanist, talked about an inner check. That is some kind of an act where we could check the stream of consciousness that's going around and we can somehow stop it, and that there's a quality of will involved there. Whatever you want to call it, that's unique about human beings. That's the third thing. The fourth thing is that we are individuals. Our consciousness is the consciousness of an individual creature, just like our lives are. If I die tomorrow, I'm hoping to live to a couple hundred years old, and we've had discussions about that. It's always a fun discussion. I perceive as an individual. I have to be nourished as an individual. I have to think as an individual. Now, each individual is hardwired with certain tendencies. One of the thinkers who's done some really great work on this for your audience is Jonathan Haidt, and he's done a lot of very, very good work on our, sort of the hardwired capacities that we each have. So the point is, we are each unique individuals. So now let's answer your question about morality, and is there an absolute morality? Having set up what life is and why we need a moral code. We need a moral code because we have to make choices. We have to make choices first of all, we have to discover what are those principles that govern us as human beings. And I've discussed some of them right here. Second, we have to use our knowledge to create the means of our survival. We're not eagles who just can look and say, oh, there's some prey and I'm going to get it. We have to figure out how to make tools, for example. We have to discover how to survive, and we have to create the means of our own survival, technology. And finally, we have to apply these universal principles to ourselves as individuals. We are continually discovering what not only helps us to survive, but to help us flourish and be happy. Because it's not just about survival. It's about flourishing. We have capacity, for example, to appreciate beauty. And so that's something we can nurture in ourselves. So what that says is, and by the way, of course, social relations are very important. Most discussions of morality often talk about, well, how should I be dealing with you, Sharif, or you, David, or whatever? Or how should we deal with our neighbors and all? Those are important questions, but they're questions that come way down the line in the context of us as rational creatures who have to use our minds to basically discover how to survive and so forth. Finally, I'll mention, so what does this all say about virtues? Well, it says that the virtues that we should practice are things like rationality, that we should put a high premium on that choice, the choice to think, to reason. Purpose, we have to direct our actions. It can't just go randomly. Self-esteem, we have to see ourselves as worthy of survival and worthy of happiness. Remember, we're self-conscious creatures. Honesty, That is, we have to have a commitment to understanding the world and understanding ourselves. That's something we have to work at. Integrity, meaning that our words and our actions and our thoughts are all integrated. Justice, that's dealing with other people based on certain codes, if people treat us right or if people are decent people in terms of these moral virtues. And benevolence, that is, we want to foster in ourselves and in society a belief that we all should be enjoying life and so forth, that we should see the world as a place that is benevolent, that's welcoming, and that we all want to flourish. And ideally, we hope that our fellows will discover the ways that will help them flourish and prosper best. So, is there an absolute morality? Yes, in terms of there are absolute moral principles based on the fact that we're rational creatures with free will, and that's our means of survival. And those principles govern us and should govern how we behave and what we do to discover the best ways to live and flourish as individuals and in a society. Anyway, that is my presentation today. I'm going to have to jump off. I see two of my colleagues are here. Hopefully Adam will pop back on in a little bit. And so you'll get Adam's take on this as well. And so anyway, Sharif and David and so forth, I wish you all happiness and flourishing in terms of these universal moral principles. So go for it, guys. Take care.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. Professor David Smith.
Hey, David.
Hey, thank you so much. Avery, thank you for your comments there too. I love the concepts going around with this. And, you know, the principles which Edward professed and went for us really help us as we look across our life and our life cycles. And as we look at how do we as a human species grow and change? And we know from looking back over historical records that our mortality has changed a lot over the centuries that we've been around. And the way we look at it, I believe, is really good as we handle the different pieces. I also believe, though, that we're at a time where we're about to see exponential growth in what we see with our mortality today. One of the biggest problems we see is as we're on the cusp of regenerative healthcare, as we're on the cusp of understanding the impacts of our telomeres getting shorter, as we're on the impact of understanding that we can now edit our DNA and our RNA and see how that goes. You know, we have crossed the barriers of being able to regenerate some of the hardest organs in our body, such as our retinas and our spleens. We're seeing a lot of things happening, but as an absolute no, it won't be there, because we are ones who, we have accidents, and that happens. We have ones with new things like new viruses, like we saw with COVID coming out, that defy what our body has produced and used. We're seeing also some new approaches that I actually love. One of the approaches that I'm become a very big believer in is immunology. For example, in cancer, I'm seeing tremendous results with it, where it's being used to alter the cancer cells to take their stealthy cells off the outside and supercharge their own body's immune system to be able to go and attack and destroy those. And we're seeing that in so many different areas. We're seeing it being able to use as we wear out joints now, and put the other elements and cross with that too. So a lot of advances in those areas. And I'm really heartened by what I'm seeing there. You know, the other thing we see is the absolute rates really depend on the environment. It includes what we're doing with our food, what we're doing with all the other elements there. And so a lot of variables, but I'm really looking forward to what Donald and David have to say, and we'll float back around as we give them a chance to participate.
Thank you. Professor Donald, can you unmute, please?
I'm not quite sure what the idea of absolute mortality means, but I think David, I think right now what we hear a lot often is it sounds sort of pejorative to say science fiction, but basically what happens is we do these interesting things where we have demos of small things, like we find a way that we can make rats live longer. And then we extrapolate and we say, well, now that we've gotten rats to live longer, then we can do the same thing with humans, and humans will live longer too. And so often I see these and I think, wow, this breakthrough is great news for rats. Boy, rats are going to live longer, healthier lives, but it doesn't really apply to us. I don't really know what you mean by this. So in a way, I'd really like to listen to what other people have to say, because I don't completely understand the topic. So let's move on.
Okay, Professor David Jekali.
Do you want to frame the question for me?
Is there absolute mortality? What do you think? And beside that, we saw in social media about your innovations. So I think our audience really interested about your innovations. So you can share some of your project information.
I think I struggle with how my particular innovations are related to the question of absolute mortality. I mean, if you're dead, you're dead. That's it. There's nothing else. And there's no evidence that there's nothing else. That's it.
So that's right.
But things is that, example, let's say in India, subcontinent, still we remember Mahatma Gandhi, right? Mahatma Gandhi, we remember. Many people practice his philosophy, his activities, and many things. There are many followers. So how come you think that people died? It's mean all of your activities and everything. Died means died. It's actually, I want to say, it's more like maybe Asian culture, but even though, yeah, for democratic issue, for scientific contribution, maybe after 100 years, when you died, maybe many people follow your activities and develop new AI, and they think, so, okay, you are a great scientist. Yeah.
But I'm still dead.
Yeah, but your activities is not dead. It's in people's mind. People are taking care of your act. It has value.
My mind and body are dead. I'm not saying it doesn't have value, but the evidence you leave behind, the digital remains, the intellectual contributions you've made to humanity, anything like that. Sure, that all that stuff exists, but that has nothing to do with you being alive. Once you're dead, you're dead. That's it. There's no like, unless you're reconstituted in a computer, or it's kind of an absolute. At least
let's say example
technology.
I do not like to bring the religious views, but still many people follow religions. Let's say Jesus, let's say Muhammad, let's say Gautam Buddhas. So what do you think? How you want to measure philosophically, not like in front of me?
Philosophy. See, I don't know if talking to me about philosophy is a good thing, because for the most part, philosophy is in my world is not a real science. You know, it hard logic, math, that's real. And you know, I have a strong belief in ethics, but it is based on SSIVA theory, which is fairly cut and dry logically. There's some very logical reasons for it. Religion is nothing wrong with it per se. It's a cultural thing, but it's not like any of it's true. There's no evidence or no empirical evidence to support any sort of deity or supernatural. Therefore, it's not really a consideration for anything, as far as I'm concerned. Religion is just not relevant.
Okay, Professor David Smith, what you want to analyze? Example, I'm doing my show from Dhaka, from South Asia. Example, if you go to India, people do not believe that they always believe they had second life. Muslim community, they believe there is a heaven, there is many things on that. That is one of the way that you can manage people activities, people ethical point of views, people contributions. I believe I have different life after my death. That's why I do not do all of the wrong things. It's my ethics. But how do you want to measure? Both in scientifically, philosophically, and if you follow the religious view or not, it's open. Yeah.
Well, you pose interesting questions here because, like David, I like to look at the various elements of it, and in the word absolute, as David said, is an absolute too, and but on mortality, we do see mortality changing as we look at the future, and on the philosophical side, you know, if you look at most of the world philosophies, if you look at most of the world religions, across multiple views of that, there is a concept of a life after death in many of them, and you see that going. You also see that the concepts there, going back through historical information, is at different times in the past there has been a lot of various differences in the mortality rates. You know, you go back into the Christian religion, you go back into the Buddhist religion, and others, you see times where people lived hundreds of years old, according to the artifacts from there. So you see that in the past. It is difficult once the word absolute throws in there, because in life today, stuff happens. You know, I could walk out the front door of my house, go to the street, and be run over by a truck. And that would, you know, cause potentially loss of my life. It could cause things which would shorten my life. But I am actually encouraged with what I see with things. I have multiple friends who have had stem cell implants that have gone through. I personally want to go and get some stem cell implants into my two eyes to reverse chronic age-related drying inside of my eyes. That's what caused retina detachment and a retina tear in one of my eyes, is the fact that as you get older, things in your body change. That's why most of us on the phone, on the broadcast, with the exception of Sharif, we're wearing glasses, because as we get older, our vision changes because of things our body does to change them. My vision has shifted 180 degrees as I've aged. I used to have perfect up close vision, and my long distance vision was not as sharp. Now it's the other way around. I can take my glasses off and read anything at the distance, but my close up vision's messed up now. So we're seeing that type of thing, which affects our quality of life, which actually affects our mortality. And Edward talked earlier about RADFest, which is an extension of life conference. And I attended some of the sessions virtually, and the science that was produced there is compelling, that we're getting better at being able to put science solutions around extending our life. And I'm encouraged by that. But like Donald said earlier, it's often done in other species, using rats, using dogs, using different stuff like that for the test. And the proof of the pudding comes as you get into human trials. And the early human trials I've seen are very encouraging. I mean, I am now perfectly willing to go and get stem cell injections in my eyes and go that way. I have friends who have gotten stem cell injections to solve really chronic disease in themselves, to even address mental stability with stem cells and other things like that. So we're heading that way. Absolute. I think there were no, because of life and life happening, I think absolute as a human sentient is not going to happen. But if we put the philosophical and the religion sides on top of it, I think we will see dramatic extensions in our lifetimes. So, Sharif, I hope that answered your question.
Thank you, Professor Donald.
Well, good. Now that I understand what you're getting at, I can make some reasonable comments. We have to ask a question: is what is a person? Is a person the body? Like when you talk to me, are you talking to my lips or my forehead, or what are you talking to? Are you talking to my mind? Like, so what is a mind? Where can you find minds? I mean, what part of the brain is the mind in? You know, have we been able to find minds in brains? No, we haven't. Have we been able to find consciousness in brains? No, we don't know. We haven't been able to locate it. Consciousness is a complicated process that where somehow we manage to integrate disparate parts of our brain, our visual system, our auditory system, our memory system. All these systems work together, and our brain has the ability to monitor these systems, and we get a feeling that those systems are those systems are active, that those systems are working. There's a book by Antonio Damasio called "The Feeling of What Happens," and that feeling of what happens is consciousness. So we ask ourselves, who are we? Or we ask ourselves who somebody else is. And when we do, what do you do when you meet somebody new to find out who they are? I mean, you don't look at them and know who they are. I mean, to some degree we do. That's where prejudices come in and things like that. Like we might look at somebody of a different race and make assumptions about them, which is we do to some degree. Hopefully we train ourselves not to do that. But we ask them, what's your job? Where do you live? Where are you from? Are you married? Do you have children? We ask these kinds of questions about the people. And as we get answers to those questions, we start building a story in our mind about who this person is and what this person is like. And where do we get those stories? We get those stories from a lifetime of hearing stories about people and hearing people talk about other people. We read novels. We hear gossip. We have lots of ways that we get fragments of information or little stories, snippets of stories that we can put together so that we can create a narrative in our mind to describe who somebody else is. And we do the same things with ourselves. When we ask ourselves who we are, we compare ourselves to others and and develop the story of how we fit into the broader society around us. And all these stories come from others. We don't create them ourselves. We live in a kind of soup of all these stories that we get from each other. And when we think of somebody like Gandhi or Jesus or any kind of person that has lived on, these people, we've never met them. I mean, their reality isn't us contacting them. Their reality isn't, they're just as, we all take them as real. I mean, if I asked you, was Gandhi real? Would you say no? No, he wouldn't. I mean, is Donald Trump real? Is Liz Truss real? I mean, ask yourself these questions. Are these people real? Yeah, of course they're real. But what are they real? What's their reality to you? The reality is just the stories that you've heard about them and the story you've built of them, the narrative that you have of them in your mind. And so, to the extent that all of us create the stories about us in other people's minds, and we become those stories to other people, we do live on, because some of us do, and we live on certainly within the people that are around us. I heard a really, really interesting TikTok that actually was very moving just the other day, where a woman was talking, and she said her brother had died 2 years before. And she said, when people came to her and she said, yeah, my brother died 2 years ago, people would say, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. And then they changed the subject, which is reasonable, she said, because, what do you say to somebody whose brother's died? I mean, do you want to talk about it and bring up the pain and make them feel worse? What do you do? And she said, well, she was talking, and this one person said to her, oh, well, what was his name? And she was flattened. No one had ever asked her that. And she said, then he said, well, what was he like? And she said, no one had ever asked. And she said she realized she wanted to talk about him because that kept him alive. That made him live. She wanted to keep him alive. And so in that way, we do live on. We live on in the minds of our families and the people that loved us. And some of us, write books and do things where we influence more people, and we live on with more people. Our bodies die. I mean, our bodies are just, we end. I mean, we don't have any consciousness. We're compost or ashes or whatever. But to the extent that people aren't really talking to our bodies. I mean, we exist as part of the social world that creates us. The stories about ourselves that we tell ourselves and others tell about us. And so to that extent, yes, we do live on.
Thank you. Professor David J. Kelly. Anything you want to add? Yeah.
I'm just much more cut and dry. It's all this metaphorical social stuff is just difficult for me to process. I look at things in terms of absolutes and provable fact.
No, it's provable fact. Example, I give you some different cultural things. I just want to learn from your culture, and you can learn something from my cultures. It's absolutely example what is happening in our real life. Let's say what you do with your grandfather, how you respect your grandfather or grandmother, how you taking care of your grandmother? I'm asking you questions. What is your answer, Mr. David Jekali?
Well, I mean, there's kind of social norms around that stuff that's just cultural stuff that's not that important to me. Culture is not, I mean, it's a thing, but it's not as important as scientific fact and rigor. You know, what I do with my grandfather is, well, he's dead. You know, that might be, it's interesting from a historical standpoint. We might learn things from his life or, you know, his legacy, but a lot of that is metaphorical or, you know, social constructs or things like that has very little value in how I look at the world or process information or things like that. And for the most part, I find culture and things like that to be full of bias and personal experience and things like that. And there's nothing wrong with any of that, but you know, I try to move as much of that from my reasoning as possible. It's just not
Okay. I understand. I can understand because long time I stay in the first world, like European cultures and Asia Pacific cultures, Indian culture. I can understand. I can understand your view. I respect your view. But fact is that, example, when I was children, I taking care of my grandfather. Yeah, this is actually religious view. My religion teach me that I have to taking care of my grandfather or my, now I'm taking care of my mother. My mother cannot walk. My mother cannot eat properly. Even she cannot take medicine properly. I'm taking care of these things. How I learned these things from my father. Okay, my father's how he learned from it is from religion. Okay, we believe
well.
that we have different life after our death. Give me chance to finish these things. I will listen. And we do, and it's a good things. Example, I see many frustrated old men in first world, in the Western world. I see in Singapore, even though you say many social good things about Singapore, many old men, because of lack of security from family, they are doing work in the restaurant in Singapore. I see. So I'm sorry about that. But for me, even if you come to my country, you do not see too much of insecure or this kind of things because it's come from culture. You do not give value, I give value. It's come from religions. Maybe many people do not give value, I give value. If for religion, if for culture, if some people life save and some people life become more secure, why we will not do that? But I'm sorry about that because of the Western culture. I saw many deprived old people in Western world. They are frustrated and I'm sorry about that. This is my experience. I was in UK, I was in Germany, I was in many countries, but maybe this is one of the things we can exchange, and we can teach our next generations that okay, it's social value. We can learn from each other. Definitely you also have many good things. You are a good scientist, I learn from you. You have very good innovations, I learn from you. I read your AGI lab, your scientific paper. Even yesterday I read your scientific papers and I help my student to learn different kind of your scientific approach. This is good. We learn from your country, learn from your activities. Maybe after 10 years or 20 years, maybe my student will teach their classroom, okay, there is a David J. Kelly, he was a great scientist, this is this. And it can be continued. So our question is that how we can be a better human, how we can contribute more. But I'm sorry, from my experience, what I see, this old man or old lady, it never happened in my country. Yeah, it's different. Yeah. Anyway, I'm open for discussion.
So, so I think you're right to a large degree in terms of you know how some Western cultures tend to be like that. In the United States, I know that in the United States, it's a little more. You have bubbles of culture. If you are talking about a community in Chicago that's Polish versus inner city culture versus suburbia, these kinds of things, you're going to see that to different degrees. And I know, like, my wife is from Poland, and how they deal with their elderly is a lot different than what you typically see here. And I'm not saying that it's good. It certainly is bad, and I could see the value in a culture that is more taking care of everyone. But I think a lot of the underlying cause has to do with evolutionary psychology, that Western culture in some ways countermands that to a large degree. But I think I can step away from cultural reasons for doing things and focus on, like SSIVA theory, which would place ethical value on helping those around you, just as a matter of course. Any sapient, sentient entity or something that had attained that level, you have this moral and ethical obligation to help, or contribute to extend their lives, to provide resources if it's possible, this sort of thing. And I find that just a matter of course. If other people choose to do the same thing for cultural reasons, that's fine. But I tend to not be as concerned about the cultural reasons for things and focus on my reasons and what I teach my children, which tends to move away from cultural reasons and try to use things like SSIVA theory or that sort of stuff. Being good, I think, is something that is perfectly definable and can be measured. And I try to choose those sorts of reasons for making those decisions, like being kind to my mother, for example, who will be here later today to have lunch. I choose to try to step away from a lot of that stuff because of the biases that it can introduce. And I've seen a lot of bias, both good and bad. And anyway, so that's kind of my take on the whole.
And I can understand. I can understand your views. Dr. Talib Raphael, I know you are from Muslim community. You are from Jordan. We are discussing about, is there absolute mortality, and what do you think? What do you think about this?
What's the question again?
Is there absolute morality
In any society?
in a society? Yeah.
No, there is no absolute mortality.
Okay.
No.
Yeah. Okay.
There's nothing
Yes.
absolute here. It changes from one culture to another, definitely. I think we have heard David speaking about his culture in the United States, but our culture is different. You know that, Sharif, very well. I'm taking care of my younger sisters and brothers, and they take care of me. It's part of our culture.
Yeah, true.
It's the culture of the developing world all together. It's not something that is only confined to Muslim neighborhoods. No.
Yes. So why you do that? Why you how you want to define your values and everything? Uh, Professor David J. Kelly brings some theories and how you want to define the developing nations' values. Is it's only the cultural things? It's only the religious things, or some other things?
Well, religion is part of our culture now, definitely. Like in any other society in this world, religion is not something on its own, but our culture has brought us like that. Our culture has made us who we are, and we cannot escape that. We cannot. Not us, not anybody in Europe, not anybody in the United States can escape that.
Thank you, Professor David Smith. Yes.
Well, the topic to me is, like I said earlier, very interesting because just today I got an update from MIT on they have a new issue, which is their mortality issue. I love the way it is introduced. From the moment you're born, the one thing you can be completely certain is that you will die. But what if aging isn't invariable after all? What if you could slow or even turn the clock back? Would you? And, there's a lot of people who are spending a lot of time with it. And, as I've talked about, as Rob has talked about, and others, the whole concept of digital twins is coming into places where you can do things. And we've seen people freezing cryogenics with human bodies for looking at the different things, how lifespans are changing. But for MIT to have an entire special issue dedicated to this topic, Sharif, I think is an indication that academia, science, philosophy, religion, the different ways we are seeing how we interact with each other is indeed changing. And, for MIT to dedicate this whole special issue, and with some of the authors in there, which are fantastic authors, with the opinions, I'm looking forward to reading this one. And I think we're going to see the places there. My religion teaches me that I will have an afterlife, and we'll see that. We have others with various forms or fashions see it, but what I have seen over the years, and this is something that most people really don't talk about, is that as we as humans, as we each reach the end of our life, this is a question that comes back to us, and we see things. We see deathbed confessions on what should have been different. I wish I had more time. I wish I had these other abilities to do things. And I think that will continue to advance and be there. But I'm going to go back to what I said earlier, is that things like at RADFest, things at NIH, things like this issue from MIT, we're seeing the ability to dramatically alter our life expectancies. We're seeing the ability to slow down aging, and in some instances, reverse aging. We're seeing the ability to replace organs in our body with regenerative health care. We're seeing the ability to use things like stem cells and others to fix, repair not only the organs, the muscles and things, but actually the genetic processes themselves. With CRISPR, I can go and edit out things in my DNA that could cause me to have a shortened life cycle. So science is catching up to the questions of mortality. But I agree, like Talib said, absolute is such a big word that if I look at physical mortality, we will not have absolute. If I look at the ability to have our human spirit, our human thoughts live in others, yes. If I look at our ability based on our religions, our philosophies, to be able to look at a type of afterlife, yes, I think that can be an absolute. But it's a very complicated problem. It's a very complicated view of understanding it across the different worldviews, the different nation views, the different political, religious, and philosophical views. But science is making advances in this area, and I'm encouraged with what I see. I have said this on one of your programs before, Sharif. The generation that is being born today, I absolutely expect their life expectancy to exceed 150 years. And the science really is coming in place that will support that. I wish it would. I wish I could apply some of that same science to me, but I've already damaged enough of my cells, and that some of them, I don't know if I can recover. But I'm looking forward to seeing what we can do with it. So, Sharif, thank you for a really important topic today.
Thank you, Professor
Thank
David Smith. Professor Donald.
Well, I wanted to kind of address a couple of things that David said. For one thing, you can qualitatively measure culture, and it's being done quite a bit. There's techniques like sociosomatic network analysis that technically what you do is you look at social relations, and then you add into the social relations semantic, basically what people are talking about, the stories and the narratives, and you develop, there's a whole series of techniques called social network analysis, and you can use the social network analysis to identify, just measure how various places within the social world, this kind of stories that they tell. And I think one of the important things is I hear people talk about how, that they're driven by logic and everything is logic and logical. And I'm like very puzzled. It's almost like they don't actually understand logic. And it's very important to realize that there's three main types of inference. There's deductive inference, inductive inference, and abductive inference. Just go look it up. And it seems to me that they're focused on deductive inference, which is actually kind of useless. It's just tautologies. It's just it's useful for writing computer programs and things like that, but it's not that useful in day-to-day life, because what you're basically saying with deductive logic is something is that something is something. Unmarried men or bachelors, some tautologies. And inductive logic is also got very, very big limits, because inductive logic is basically looking at patterns and saying, since something always happens, it's going to continue to happen. And Bertrand Russell's example of why that doesn't work is that the turkey gets this idea that every single day the farmer comes and feeds it first thing in the morning, and so therefore it can reason that every morning the farmer is going to come and feed it first thing in the morning, but it gets a rude awakening on Christmas morning when the farmer comes and chops off his head and has it for Christmas dinner. So inductive reasoning doesn't work either. But the main kind of reasoning that we use is abductive reasoning, which is guessing. It's making hypotheses. And human beings use abductive reasoning more than any other type of reasoning. And we don't really know completely how that works. That's it. In a way, we might call that intuition. It's how we make decisions. Is we just have to guess. and we have to try things just because we don't really know we don't know what's around the corner. We've been around that corner 100 times, but we don't know, or 1,000 times, we don't know what's going to be around that corner the next time we go around that corner. When somebody talks, and they say it or they, we have to guess what they're meaning. That's why computers can't understand language, because they can't do that at all. So logic is not logic's not the razor sharp tool that you think that it is. And now we know in neuroscience that we act first, and then afterwards we explain why we did what we did. So we get the idea that we're using our volition, and we make a choice, and then based on the choice we do something. But that's not the way we work. We actually do something, and then our brain explains why we did it. So the whole idea that we're able to logically go out in the world and decide what we're going to do logically and make logical decisions is just simply not the way our brain works, and it's not the way logic works. So we have to understand that those explanations and those stories that we tell to explain what we did come from someplace. They don't, and where they come from is the social world that we live in. And we can identify those stories, and we can identify where those stories are most prevalent. And just like Talib said, in every place we have different stories. So the stories that we have in California that I grew up with, and the stories that somebody in Lebanon or Bangladesh or whatever, the explanations that they have to make sense of the world are going to be different than the explanations to make sense of the world that each of us winds up having. So I go back to what I was saying about how we do live on, because we are really the stories that we tell ourselves and other people and other people tell. And I think when you look at the question of morality, it's human beings are connected to each other, and the example that's the most obvious is that we have language. I mean, how could we talk to each other if we didn't, in our minds, know that each other knows the same things? In other words, how could I talk to you about shares or companies or religion or anything unless I knew that you knew what I was talking about? So somehow in our brains we have a model. I know that you have a view of the world that's enough similar to mine that I can talk about things, and you know what I'm talking about. And that connects us in a way that's so incredible that we don't completely understand how that works. But that is just absolute evidence that we are connected together in ways that that it's just we're bonded together. It's just we're one in that sense. And so our morality, we have to help each other, because if we didn't, how could we survive? Human beings have to help each other. It's part of us. It's built into we're social creatures. That's something that we have to do. So there's an underlying morality of the fact that we have to help each other and take care of each other in order to exist. And how it manifests itself in different cultures is going to be different, but because of the stories, the explanations that we give for why things happen. So it's not going to be absolute in that sense that the explanations are going to be different, but there's also an underlying reality that we have to be connected. We have to be connected to each other. We're connected to each other, and and we have to take care of each other in order to survive. And that's what I
Thank you. Thank you.
need.
Professor David Jekali, what's your concluding remarks?
Well, I thought Donald brought up a good point, and strictly speaking, humans are unable to think logically. I mean, Damasio's work proves that human decisions are all emotional all the time. In the human brain, decisions are based on how we feel about the decisions, and the only way for us to be, and even there, feelings or emotions are inconsistent between individuals, and a lot of it is the reference point that we all kind of end up basing how we classify our own feelings is based on cultural context, and that's also been proven. But for the most part, like the what's called the Western emotional model has kind of seeped into most major cultures around the world. Happiness, quote unquote, or sadness is kind of universally understood, but it has been proven, not Damasio, that would be getting to Lisa Feldman's work, that it isn't necessarily the model, that emotional model that humans are necessarily built in with. It can be different. But that said, I do think humans can think logically by abstraction, but it's something that takes a lot of work. In my case, I have amygdala abnormalities and other neurological abnormalities, which makes it so my emotional landscape is limited at best, and that causes some problems. So I have to process information a little differently, just to make decisions and being able to function. Where I'm, particularly interested in bias, and things like that. But that said, going back to the original topic, just the concept of mortality, to me, I mean, it's an absolute. You're either dead or not. And the fact that ideas about you or experiences about you or information that you've left, all of that stuff is just something else. It's not a relevant factor to your mortality, quote unquote.
Thank you. Professor Dr. Talib Rafael, what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
I think David summed it up in a good way, because mortality is a destiny. It's not something that we could play with, but we could, of course, as Mr. David Smith said, we could delay that. We could extend the life of human beings by more scientific improvement. But eventually, we're all going to die. It's a fact. And anybody that denies that is not living in a real world here. I think, regardless of any culture, all cultures talk about death in a certain way that is similar to each other. But I think what David said is very important here, that mortality is a destiny. It's something that must happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Excellent discussion. I believe that from today's discussion, our audience can learn a lot of things. And you know that World Talent Economy Forums, already we are working with 22,000 education institutions in South Asia. It's happened 2017. It's definitely based on our topic. December 7, my father died. When my father died, I find I cannot arrange proper treatment for him. And I find that developing nations, country like Bangladesh, need more research, innovations, technology, healthcare advancement, and many more things. And we cannot manage it. So yes, last 5 years, uh, I developed these World Talent Economy forums. I engage with lot of intellectual community, those who are really good. They are supporting our projects, and after 5 years, I come back and I can say now how I getting engaged with my youth communities, my local communities. I'm sure if we can work next 2 to 3 years, definitely it will improve a lot. And this way, uh, my father alive, my father believe in educations, my father believe in contribution. He was freedom fighters, and he give me some philosophical aspect before his death. And I believe that if I can do good work for my community, for my society, it will be helpful. And whatever we are doing, it's not for money, it's 100% free. World Talent Economy Forum, we never charge any single money uh, from any of our audience or from any of our people. Anybody can contribute, anybody can join, and anybody can collaborate. But I can ensure you, the speakers, those who support World Talent Economy Forum, your contribution will be priceless, because my students, my youth community, my 22,000 institutions, millions of students, right now they are working. Right now I'm working with Central Bank of Bangladesh, uh, the bankers, NGOs, largest university, corporations, academy, many small institutions, everybody joining in our ecosystem. And I can say it will be one of the largest human progressions and human revolution what World Talent Economy Forum doing. And I want to give thanks all of our speakers, because your contribution is priceless. You supporting our project, that's why our community can learn new things, and this way we can minimize the gap. So I want to request, if you have an innovation, if you really want to contribute for the people, we have millions of people. Through your innovations, through your technology, through your modern science, you can help a lot of people, and we can help each others, thank you, Professor David Smith, Professor Donalds, Professor David J. Kelly, Professor Dr. Talib Rafael, for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forum. And I want to inform you all that we developed 3 campuses in Dhaka. One is Gulshan. Definitely, it has a very good facilities with Central Bank of Bangladesh. Another one in Dhanmondi, and another one is Mirpur. 3 different campus. Any of the people want to join in our team, we want to welcome you all in Dhaka. I'm sure you will enjoy your work with our team. Thank you, everyone. I request all of our audience, please share our content with your government agency, with corporation and academy. And we have some largest conference in Dhaka University, as well as uh, Nikola Tesla Technology Conference will be very, very important for all of us. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.
You're cutting off.